Awesome. Good morning and thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for all the feedback. I've read every blog intently. I've taken nothing personally, but we're going to answer all the questions. We actually spent a lot of time. Bob documented all the blogs, and we went through, okay, how do we actually address the agenda for the questions that are out there? So what I'm going to do is actually, we deleted a bunch of marketing slides, or a bunch of slides that were there, really talk about our customer deployment, customer progress in the first two slides. After that is the software architecture that Jeff mentioned. So for video purposes, Sudheer Matta, run product management for Mist. So where we are starting, again, just two slides in terms of customer content, right? At the very top of the pyramid, just in the Fortune 10, one of the customers has deployed over 5,000 APs with us, going to probably about 25,000 next year. Another customer in the Fortune 10 has finished their pilots and are going to about, roughly about 10 to 15,000 APs this year. This is within the Fortune 10. A third customer, and as a wireless guy, my master's thesis 19 years ago was TCP performance over Wi-Fi, right? I used to be a useful engineer many moons ago, but now I do this stuff, right? But anyway, as a wireless guy, I've never had an opportunity to present to the CEO of a Fortune 10 company. But we just closed and met with the CEO of a Fortune 10 company because we could disrupt their business and digitize their business, right? So at the very top, we're seeing tremendous progress. What I'm going to do in the next slide is actually take a few examples and run through deep on some of those customer deployments. As you can see, in the top Fortune 100 companies, 20 of the Fortune 100 are in some stage of deploying. The retail has been extremely friendly to us because, as you all know, if they don't digitize, they're disrupted away by Amazon. And so they are in existential crisis. The convergence of Wi-Fi and BLE that we've brought to the table is helping them digitize. We're almost running the table in retail. If we are present, we're winning. And I'm going to show you some very large deployments we've already done in retail and some that are starting. Right? So anyway, on. And then again, in the lower end of the market, in the commercial space where there's anywhere from 100 employees to 1,000 employees, we're doing really, really well as well because a cloud-based solution just fits well in that market.
Quick question.
Yeah.
The largest single deployment, that's not single site, right?
It's not single site. So I'm going to talk about that exact deployment just now.
Right, thank you.
So our largest single deployment is Petsmart. Petsmart is deployed across 1,600 stores nationwide in Canada, about 13,000 APs. Project started Thanksgiving of last year. It was actually a very honest to goodness evaluation between Mist and Meraki, right? They said, guys, if the Wi-Fi doesn't work, then none of this other stuff matters. So they said, we're going to just hardcore do Wi-Fi evaluation. We were given five stores, Meraki took 5 stores, and we did about a 30, 45-day evaluation into that. After that, they basically came back and said, you know what, you surprised us. The Wi-Fi actually worked as better than what we thought it would be for a company of your age. And then second, they said, whenever we had issues, the visibility that you offered was unparalleled. Right? So they said, good, my phones work, my scanners work, all of that kind of stuff. So then, after the Wi-Fi check box was checked, they said, let's now talk about how can you help us digitize our business, right? And that's where it was game over. So once the digitization conversation starts, again, very few vendors in the market can actually stand up to that convergence of Wi-Fi and BLE. So today I'm happy to say 13,000 APs, 0 open support tickets, and they're a public reference for us and a great reference at that, right? Again, speaks to one of the things that you will see if ever you talk to them is the performance of the Wi-Fi dashboard for them on AP number 1 to AP number 13,000 has been the same, right? If you've been in our industry, that's one of the bane of our existence in terms of as you load stuff, your performance starts to struggle.
So out of curiosity, on Petsmart, what would be typical APs and the virtual beacons per store?
So typically about 6 or 7 APs per store, 2 or 3 additional BT11s. Obviously, every AP has a beacon in it. So for them, they basically went for eye-level accuracy. And Bob's going to go through their use case a little bit. But the point was, really good use cases, right? The idea was when I walk into the store, I want to be able to be recognized. John Smith came in. He brought Fluffy for the appointment. Let me check Fluffy into the appointment. Let an associate come in and meet. All kinds of interesting tests, wayfinding within stores, all of that, right? And Bob's going to actually show you a couple of videos around some deployment like that.
So a quick question from Twitter is, what's your largest single site deployment?
Yep, I'm going to talk about that.
Okay.
So the largest single site deployment for us is about 1,000 APs, community college, and it's a contiguous deployment, and one SSID spanning for all students and staff. That's the largest one we have, right? We obviously support extensive tunneling from our APs, L2TP v3 and guest anchors and all that kind of stuff. So that's the largest one we have. And we'll talk about, I think, we have every intent to talk about the conversation on how does the cloud software architecture come to the campus, right? Yes.
So is that campus also using BLE and location services, or are they just using it for Wi-Fi?
Those particular guys are using Wi-Fi, but Bob's going to talk about a pretty large installation of BLE plus Wi-Fi in a hospitality sector, which is actually the one at the bottom.
And just a quick follow-up to Petsmart, you were talking about how they've had 0 trouble tickets.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's from the user perspective?
0 open trouble tickets.
0 open trouble.
0, okay.
That's
open
correct.
trouble
That's correct.
tickets. So is that a product?
Them all out last night.
That's right.
So is that a
We were
product?
working very hard last night.
Wes had a long night last night.
So is that a product of the AI functionality helping reduce those trouble tickets?
I think so. And I'm going to talk to you about how the deployment architecture ran, a lot of the, literally, things that we learned, right? How, firmware versions, switch reboots, all that kind of stuff. You're going to see that in the demo, right? And again, as Jeff said, the whole point of this AI engine, if you've ever followed the journey of IBM Watson, right? The human participants, they basically said, we saw the machine come for us, right? And that's the journey we went through with these guys and many more, right? So the second one, this is actually this is large contiguous corporate campus deployment, right? And this one, again, some of them are willing to go public, some of them are not. Most everyone in the room probably are using a product of theirs. And what they do is they had Cisco 3800 AP deployments in their corporate campus. For whatever reason, they were having some issues. They were having voice issues and they were having some roaming issues the way they're deployed, right? So they said, Mist, your story sounds a little too good to be true. Our reputation with our users is not great right now. We're going to give you a shot, right? 3-month-old 3800 deployments. Mist went in, deployed, Saturday night, cut over, and Monday morning. The wireless, anecdotal evidence, the users felt, hey, the wireless was better.
The entire campus?
And I'll tell you, so how it went to the campus. It started with, they did one building in their corporate campus. There were about 10, 15 buildings, a large campus here, about 5 miles from here, right? So just one building where they're basically founders and their e-staff sits, right? So that cut over, they said, the wireless actually feels better, but it's anecdotal. We're going to give it a shot, right? So about a month later, they said, you know what? Actually, not anecdotal. Wireless problems, the number of normal, help desk wireless tickets coming in dramatically reduced. And not only that, when we have this obviously much better visibility, today they went global, right? Every office across the entire, across the globe in probably 20, 30 countries for them have all gone Mist, very brand new APs replaced.
Quick question, just out of curiosity, did the previous install, was that done by themselves on site, or was it, and did you guys have involvement in the deployment of your product on their site?
No, the first question, the previous deployment was done by a partner for them. But why their current APs don't work for them, I'm glad they didn't, but something somewhere was wrong. But architecturally, once they came to Mist, the visibility and that analytics was the game changer.
Understood. And you hear it all the time. We came in, we saved the day, and all that. And there are VARs out there that
They're
Some are
not good.
better than others. So just for transparency's sake, I was curious.
I agree. Basically, our go-to-market is through our partners. We don't do any direct deployments, direct installs, direct anything. So yeah, it actually goes through a partner as well. But fair point, right? Again, another one. This one is much larger. Massive online retailer. All of us have bought stuff from them. And what they do is their journey with us was very interesting, right? They did one site here in Berkeley with us for 6 months, just 6 APs, 6 months, right? And then for 6 months, they disappeared on us. And we said, what were they doing? What they took is they took all of our APIs, and their mantra was, the next site we launch has to be completely programmatically deployed, right? Without logging into the Mist dashboard. So they came back. The second site was launched in February of 2017, in January of 2017, completely programmatically. And then 6 weeks later, they did 300 sites with us because they've automated their way into it. So today, they went from 1 to 300. And the 300 sites, a lot of them were actually their existing Meraki deployment. We displaced every Meraki AP in that enterprise. And now these guys represent probably by the end of this year, will probably be a much larger deployment than Petsmart.
Just another real quick question on that. When you guys do that, do you go in and redesign, or do you do like a rip and replace, or doesn't matter?
So we actually have an adapter bracket for legacy enterprise APs. So we would do a plug out, plug in. 35 seconds, the AP will have clients connected. I have a video to prove that, right? So 35 seconds, you plug in an existing AP, plug out of existing AP, put the Mist AP in, and you're off and off.
It's interesting because just like sometimes when these customers are having trouble to begin with, it's because of poor design from the beginning.
That's right.
So it's just interesting to see that you guys can come in and then whether it's using AI or not, have a solution and then maybe mitigate issues using your AI technology just based on what you're gathering immediately off the bat.
Right. Actually, what I will tell you is this, right? For the most of these customers, Wi-Fi is bread and butter. If that particular customer, Wi-Fi is down, they count in the millions by the hour on their productivity loss because they're not able to ship stuff, right?
I can relate, maybe not to that scale, but I know what you're saying.
Right? And so,
That's pretty much everyone these days.
So what the first thing we had to do and do very, very well is Wi-Fi that works. Almost everything else is nuisance, is on the top, right? Gravy on top, right? So that's why I think some of the large deployments for us, the very first thing they say is, you know what? You actually took care of the detail, right? 2.4 gig performance. We have one customer, they literally only use 2.4. Okay, 27,000 APs, their current existing install base. When we came to the scene, they attended a Wireless Wednesday. When they came to the Wireless Wednesday, they were 3 weeks away from an Aruba purchase order. Okay, and they said, "Whoa, this is a little too good to be true, guys." And so, but stopped their RFP process, started with Mist. About 3 months in, went through all site formats for them, including a very large one that uses only 2.4 gig, and they said, wow, your 2.4 gig performance is something we did not expect. And today, again, we don't have a PO, so I don't have them here, but we're going to own that franchise. They're replacing 27,000 Wi-Fi APs and 14,000 sensors with 27,000 Mist APs. No more sensors.
Can you expand upon why the 2.4 performance in Mist is so much better than what others can provide?
No, I think, a lot of times it comes down to paying attention to the detail on how devices behave, right? Again, as I said, I wrote the entire .11 Max stack at some of my previous companies because a lot of times it just comes down to understanding client behavior better. That's it, right? Roel.
So to what capacity does Mist adapt to different clients?
Again, you throw the challenge at us. You know why again, besides everything else in retail, one of the reasons we're running the table in retail, our POC goes in, they don't touch our firmware again.
So do you find that these guys, because they have the scale limitation within their teams, that with the rip and replace, because of the visibility that you're providing them, is it mainly non-Wi-Fi issues that they're bringing up?
Non-Wi-Fi too. There's a scenario in the demo I'll talk about where literally one of these customers, they would have brought 50 stores down because they were doing a router upgrade. Our system caught that. We have unrelated to the router. We have no relationship with the router company. We stopped that 50 store, and I'll show that demo around that, right? So good question. Sorry.
I want to go back
Jonathan.
to something you said earlier.
Yeah.
You said 35 seconds to serve compliance. So that's brand new AP out of the box, nothing done previously, plug it in. Of course, using the APIs to do all configuration and all that.
17-second boot time. That's what we have, right? When you engineer an AP ground up, you could take out a lot of junk that doesn't belong in 2018, right? So in the spirit of time, but thank you for the conversation. This is how we're hoping to have the rest of the session. And again, I think, I'm going to lead up and have Bob speak to this, but one of the fundamental differences for us, and we've all done Wi-Fi for a long time, and you have as well, is really our software architecture. So Keith, I think you asked the question in your blog, what is truly the difference between a controller in my data center to a controller in the cloud? Is it that much different? Why do you guys keep harping about this? And so we figured we'd actually slow down and talk a little bit about some of the ground up engineering that went into it, right? In my experience, in my third startup, by the time a startup hits about 3.5, 4 years, what happens is the startup behind the scenes is starting to retool because what got them there is not going to get them to the next 5 years. We are so grateful that the architecture we've brought in is actually scaling. Again, that's why every one of those customers is a reference customer for us. Most of our customers, including those large guys that won't put their name on a slide, are reference customers for us because the architecture actually is a living, breathing, elastically scalable one. So Bob.